Hello everyone. So welcome to session 5 of IS Baba's rapid revision series of 500 high probability topics for prelims 2020. I'm Preetham Reddy and I will be dealing 15 important topics which are very crucial for prelims examination this year. So today's first topic is 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act. So this 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act provided constitutional status to the NCBC, that is National Commission for Backward Classes. So National Commission for Backward Classes. So this NCBC now has the authority to examine complaints and welfare measures regarding socially and educationally backward classes. So remember, now NCBC has the authority to examine complaints and welfare measures regarding socially and educationally backward classes. Previously, this NCBC was a statutory body under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. And then you have to remember this Indira Sane case of 1992. So Supreme Court had directed the government to create a permanent body. So in Indira Sane case, Supreme Court had directed the government to create a permanent body to entertain, examine and recommend the inclusion and exclusion of various backward classes for the purpose of benefits and protection. Now let's see the structure of NCBC. So first point what we have to remember is the NCBC, that is National Commission for Backward Classes, consists of 5 members. So it consists of 5 members. Second thing, out of those 5, one is the chairperson, vice chairperson and 3 members. And all these people, third point, all these members are appointed by the president. At the same time, you have to remember that the conditions of service. So fourth one, conditions of service and is actually provided by the president. Okay, so remember, condition of service and tenure of this NCBC is determined by the president. So next we'll see the constitutional provisions which deals with the backward classes. So first one is Article 340. So Article 340 deals with the need to identify the socially and educationally backward classes, understand what are the conditions for their backwardness, and also make a recommendation to remove the difficulties that they face. 102nd Constitutional Amendment Act has now inserted 2 articles, that is Article 338B and 342A. So now we have to remember these 2 things. So Article 338B provides authority to National Commission for Backward Class to examine complaints and welfare measures regarding socially and educationally backward classes, which already we dealt. So Article 342A, so this point is very important. It empowers president. So it empowers president to specify socially and educationally backward classes in various states and union territories. And one condition is there, president can do this in consultation with governor of the concerned state. So he has to consult governor of that respective state. So president can specify socially and educationally backward classes in various states and UTs. Remember that. And one more important point is, law enacted by parliament will be required if list of backward classes is to be amended. So in order to amend the list of backward classes, the law enacted by parliament is required. So let's see the next Constitutional Amendment Act. So 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act. So it provides for 10% reservation in government jobs and educational institutions for economically weaker section in the unreserved category. So in the unreserved category. At the same time, this 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act also amends 2 important articles of fundamental rights, that is Article 15 and Article 16, to provide for reservation based on economic backwardness. So to provide reservation based on economic backwardness. See, for the purposes of this Article 15 and Article 16 economically weaker section to be notified by the state from time to time on the basis of family income and other indicators of economic advantage. So EWS, that is economically weaker section, is notified by the state from time to time on the basis of family income and other indicators. So what are the conditions? Like, you can read about those things. What are the conditions which are required for economically weaker section certificate to apply for that? What we will see is what are the new clauses which were added recently due to the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act. So it added new clause, that is subclause 6 to the Article 15, which allows government to carve reservation for the economically weaker section of society in higher education institutions, including the private ones, whether they are aided or not by the state. And also it also specifies that minority educational institutions are exempted. So remember, Article 15, now government has provided reservation based on economically weaker section, and now especially in higher education institutions. Okay, and it includes both private ones, aided ones, or not the aided ones, but minority education institutions are exempted. So remember that. So next new clause, that is subclause 6, was added to Article 16, which provides for quota for economically deprived sections in the initial appointment of the government services. So here it talks about reservation for economically weaker section in government services. Okay, so already, like, we know about Indira Sane case 1992. So Indira Sane case also provided, so 9-judge bench had fixed limit of 50% reservation ceiling. It had fixed 50% reservation ceiling. And in Indira Sane case, you have to remember the judgment also had barred reservation solely on economic criteria. Now we'll see what is this Article 46. So Article 46, DPSP asks the government to promote the educational and economic interests of the weaker section of the society. So you might be knowing fundamental duty, you would have read, sorry, DPSP, Article 46. So it is a moral obligation of the state to promote the educational and economic interest of the weaker section of the society. So we will see next important Constitutional Amendment Act, that is 104th Constitutional Amendment Act. This Amendment Act amended Article 334. Now, why did it amend Article 334? So to extend the reservation of SC/ST in the Lok Sabha and State Assembly, so both in Lok Sabha and State Assembly, from 70 years to 80 years. So initially the Constitution has provided that the extension was 70 years. Now it has increased it to 80 years, that is by 10 years extra. Okay, it extended the reservation. However, you have to note that this 104th Constitutional Amendment Act removed the reserved seats for the Anglo-Indian community. So it removed the Anglo-Indian seats for, reserved seats for the Anglo-Indian community, both in Lok Sabha as well as State Assembly. Okay, so what is Article 334 and Article 341? Now we'll see. So about Article 334, Article 334 actually provided for reservation of seats and special reservation to cease after 70 years from the commencement of the Constitution. In other words, these provisions will cease to have effect on 25th January 2020 if not further extended. So now 104th Constitutional Amendment Act extended the reservation of seats and special representation especially to SC/STs by 10 more years. And Article 341 subclause 2, so it's a very important article. So the power to make changes in the SC list lay only with the Parliament. Okay, so this particular article doesn't deal with the 104th Constitutional Amendment Act, but I just want you to know some important facts that in order to like make changes in the SC list, the power lays only with the Parliament. Even the President of India does not have the power to tinker or alter or make changes in the list. Okay, remember. So next important topic is tussle for power, Delhi versus Centre. So recently there was Supreme Court verdict regarding the division of powers between the Delhi and the Centre. So Supreme Court verdict said the Centre has exclusive jurisdiction over public services. So on public services, the earlier judgment, that is 2018, when 5-judge constitution bench gave its verdict, it had ruled that decision of the Delhi government will not require the concurrence of the Lieutenant Governor except in matters relating to land, home and public order. However, the judgment was silent on matters relating to the services and other issues. So right now, recently Supreme Court gave verdict and it said Centre has exclusive jurisdiction over public services. So remember, Centre has exclusive jurisdiction over public services in Delhi, and it covers issues like transfer of officials. Okay. In other words, elected government does not have the right to transfer officers. It can be done by Lieutenant Governor. So public services like transfer of officers is done by Lieutenant Governor. So other important areas we'll see. So Supreme Court also gave verdict on other important areas. So Supreme Court has stated that the Anti-Corruption Bureau, ACB, so Anti-Corruption Bureau is under the exclusive authority of the Lieutenant Governor, and Delhi government has no power in this regard. So it's a very crucial judgment. Supreme Court said that Anti-Corruption Bureau is under the exclusive authority of Lieutenant Governor, and Delhi government has no jurisdiction over such officers of central government. Second important point is Supreme Court also said that ACB is not empowered to investigate like any offences of central government employees under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So Supreme Court said ACB has no jurisdiction over officers of central government. At the same time, the ACB is under the exclusive authority of the Lieutenant Governor. Next important point is Supreme Court also held that Delhi state government has no power to set up an inquiry commission to probe corruption cases. So Supreme Court held that Delhi state government has no power to set up any inquiry commission to probe corruption cases. Supreme Court also held that Lieutenant Governor, while appointing the special public prosecutor, is to act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So these were the recent judgments on the division of powers between Delhi versus Centre. So please remember. Next important point is 69th Amendment Act, Article 239A and Article 239AB, which all deals with the division of or special powers related to Delhi. Okay. So 69th Amendment Act 1992. So 69th Amendment Act 1992, it added two articles, Article 239AA and 239AB. And this Article 239A and AB deals with the Union Territories of Delhi and it gave special status to the Delhi. So we'll see what is this. Article 239 AA provided that the Union Territory of Delhi be called as National Capital Territory of Delhi, and its administrator shall be Lieutenant Governor. And Article 239AB provides that the President may by order suspend the operation of any provision of Article 239AA or of all or any other provisions of any law made in pursuance of this particular article. So 239AB empowers the President that he may by order suspend the operation of any provisions under this Article 239AA. It also provides for a council of ministers for Delhi consisting of not more than 10% of the total number of the members in the assembly. Next important topic is tussle of power between Lieutenant Governor and Puducherry CM. So again, this was one of the issue. So court gave a ruling on this one also, and we have to remember few important things. One, under the constitution, the union territory, so usually union territory belongs to the president, and who runs it through the lieutenant governor or the administrator. So usually the union territory belong to the president, and through the lieutenant governor as administrator, they run this union territory. And under section 44 of the Union Territories Act 1963, Lieutenant Governor has to act on the advice and aid of the Council of Ministers. So this is very important. This is what the Supreme Court said. Any difference of opinion between them can be referred to the President. So this is what is next important fact, that whenever there is some difference of opinion between them, that is the Council of Ministers and the Lieutenant Governor, that matter should be referred to the President. And in meantime, if administrator's action prevails on any urgent matter, so if in case if it is urgent matter, then administration's action will prevail. So Government of Union Territories Act 1963, so it has allowed LG a very much discretionary power. So it has given discretionary powers for the LG office, but these must be exercised judicially and only in exceptional circumstances. Okay. So these discretionary powers of the Lieutenant Governor should be exercised judiciously and also only in exceptional circumstances. Next important topic is the difference between Delhi and Puducherry. So articles we already saw. Article 239AA and 239AB deals with the Delhi, and Article 239A deals with Puducherry. So the court recently, like it provided that Article 239AA imposes several restrictions on the legislature of Delhi. However, no such restrictions are imposed by 239A. Okay. So we already saw what all those restrictions. So it is on the land, home and public order and public services also. So courts recently it also highlighted that 239AA imposes several restrictions on the Delhi, whereas there are no such restrictions by Article 239A on Puducherry. Third important point is Lieutenant Governor mostly is guided by Government of Union Territories Act 1963 in Puducherry. However, Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is guided by Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi Act 1991, as well as Transaction of Business of the Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi Rules 1993. So, Lieutenant Governor of Delhi is guided by two different laws, whereas Lieutenant of Puducherry is guided mostly by the Government of Union Territory Act 1963. So next important point is the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi enjoys greater power than the LG of Puducherry, or LG of Puducherry enjoys lesser powers than the Lieutenant Governor of the Delhi. Okay. LG of Delhi also has executive functions over public order, police and land. However, there are no such executive functions related to matters dealing with public order, police and land. That is, Puducherry Assembly can legislate on any issue under the concurrent and state list. However, if the law is in conflict with a law passed by parliament, the law passed by parliament prevails. Okay. Next important topic is project Blue Flag program, Blue Flag beach program. Okay. So this project Blue Flag beach program is important because recently Environment Ministry had selected 12 beaches in India. So try to know those beaches name also. So 12 beaches in India for a Blue Flag certification. So if those beaches get the Blue Flag certification, so it gets the international recognition conferred on the beaches that meet certain criterias. Okay, so we'll see about this Blue Flag beach program or certification. So Blue Flag certification provides some stringent standards, okay, for responsible and sustainable amenities and infrastructure development to be taken in the coastal zones or near the beaches. And this Blue Flag certification is accorded by Denmark based Foundation for Environment Education. And this Blue Flag certification or Blue Flag beach is an eco tourism model. Okay, so we can consider this Blue Flag beach, so any beach which has got Blue Flag certification, as an ecotourism model. So the main objective of the program is to promote sustainable development in coastal regions and strive to achieve high international standards. So we'll see what are the stringent criteria under this Blue Flag beach certification. So usually 33 stringent criteria are considered, and they are broadly divided into 4 different things, that is environmental education and information, bathing water quality standards, so bathing water quality standards, and environment management and conservation, and safety and services. Next important topic for us is integrated coastal zone management. So this integrated coastal zone management is a World Bank assisted project, and it is being implemented by the Department of Forests and Environment with assistance from the Ministry of Forest, Environment and Climate Change. It is important to note that this integrated coastal zone management aims to improve livelihood of coastal communities. So it aims to improve livelihood of coastal communities and conserve the ecosystem. Okay. So it aims to improve the livelihood of coastal communities, conserve the coastal ecosystem. It also helps to identify infrastructure requirements and livelihood improvements in coastal districts. It also includes conservation of mangroves. So it is one of the key component of this program. And also the national component of the project includes mapping of the country's coastline and also the demarcation of the hazard line. And this point is little important, that the National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management, Chennai, will provide the scientific and technical inputs. So this is in Chennai, technical inputs. So next important topic is environmental and societal management, social management framework. So Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change recently unveiled a draft environmental and social management framework. So this framework is a part of World Bank funded project, and this framework will dictate how prospective infrastructure projects situated along the coast ought to be assessed before they can apply for the clearance. So this framework kind of provides certain guidelines to be followed before giving clearances to certain infrastructure projects along the coastal areas. And this document was prepared by SICOM, that is Society for Integrated Coastal Management. So this document or framework, environmental and social management framework, was prepared by CCOM, an Environment Ministry affiliated body. The document seeks to assist the Government of India in enhancing coastal resource efficiency and resilience by building collective capacity for adopting and implementing integrated coastal management approaches. And we have to remember the main objective is to build sustainable infrastructure projects, at the same time integrated coastal management approaches to follow that one, and also to enhance coastal resource efficiency and resilience. So far, three coastal states, namely Gujarat, Odisha, and West Bengal. So these three coastal states have prepared this integrated coastal zone management plans with the support from World Bank. Next important topic is CCOM. So we saw here CCOM is the one which actually prepared this particular document or the framework, environmental and social management framework. So we'll try to understand about this CCOM. So CCOM, that is Society of Integrated Coastal Management, is under Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and it is the national project management unit for both ICZMP and ENCORE programs. ICZMP, that is Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan. Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan. And ENCORE is Enhancing Coastal and for ocean research, ocean resource efficiency. So ENCORE, that is Enhancing Coast and Ocean Resource Efficiency. So remember, this CCOM is the National Project Management Unit for Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan, as well as Enhancing Coastal and Ocean Resource Efficiency. And major vision of this CCOM is to establish vibrant, healthy and resilient coastal and marine environment. And let's know the objectives and functions of this CCOM. It supports the implementation of these ICZMP and ENCORE activities, also promotes research and development in coastal management areas, and it also checks violation of coastal regulation zones, and also it helps support pilot project Blue Flag Beach program. Okay, so it is also involved in the Blue Flag Beach program. It is also involved in the environmental and societal management framework. That's the reason CCOM is important this year. Next important topic is this particular scheme, Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Uttan Mahabiyam. Okay, so in simple it is called KUSUM. So this KUSUM scheme was launched in 2019. Okay, so as it says, it's a Kisan, so it is something related to farmer. So it is a scheme aims to add solar and other renewable capacity. So Urja is like solar related things. So Urja Suraksha Evam Uttan Mahabiyan. So what is this scheme doing is it is providing some renewable technology to the farmers. Okay, the scheme was launched in 2019 under Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and this scheme aims to add solar and other renewable capacity of 25,750 megawatt by 2022. So 25,750 megawatt by 2022, and this KUSUM aims to provide energy efficiency and sustainable irrigation access to the farmers, and it helps to achieve 100 gigawatts solar target by 2022. And this PM KUSUM scheme has three important components. One is 10,000 megawatts of decentralized ground mounted grid connected renewable power plants, installation of 17.50 lakh standalone solar powered agriculture pumps, and solarization of 10 lakh grid connected solar powered agriculture pump. So it is actually aiming to help the farmers. It is providing energy sufficiency and sustainable irrigation access to the farmers. So next important topic is Utkarsh 2022. So this particular scheme, Utkarsh 2022, so RBI board finalized a 3-year roadmap. So RBI board, it finalized the 3-year roadmap to improve regulation, supervision, and among other functions of the central bank. And this Utkarsh 2022 is in line with the global central bank plan to strengthen the regulatory and supervisory mechanism. So remember, it is dealing with this regulation and supervision of the central bank. Okay. Next important point is translocation of wild buffaloes. So Asiatic wild buffaloes. So recently there was news article which dealt with the translocation of 5 female wild buffaloes from Manas National Park in Assam to Udanti Wildlife Sanctuary in Chhattisgarh. So simple, they can ask, where is this Udanti Wildlife Sanctuary? It is in Chhattisgarh. And this Asiatic wild buffalo is Chhattisgarh's state animal. It is also called Bubalus arni, scientific name. And this wild buffalo is a part of Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, and IUCN status is endangered. And usually the habitats are tracts of tall grasslands and riverine forests in India and Nepal, and usually these wild buffaloes are also found in central India. Next important topic is Vikramshila Gangetic dolphin. Is a very important topic because Vikramshila Gangetic Dolphin Sanctuary, which is from Sultanganj to Kahalganj on the Ganga in Bihar, is the only dolphin sanctuary in the country. So it is only dolphin sanctuary in the country, and this particular dolphin sanctuary is over National Waterway 1. So it is over National Waterway 1, which is connecting Haldia to Varanasi. And this NW1, that is National Waterway 1, passes through this country's only one dolphin reserve, that is Vikramshila Gangetic Dolphin Sanctuary. So experts have pegged the population of Ganges dolphin, already it is like 150 to 200, and this national waterway will affect the Gangetic dolphins. So we'll know about Gangetic dolphins. So Gangetic river dolphin is placed under the endangered category of IUCN Red List, and this Gangetic dolphin is also called as Susu, and it inhabits Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna, and also Karnapuli and Sangu river system of Nepal, India and Bangladesh. It is threatened by removal of river water and siltation arising from deforestation, pollution and entanglement in fisheries nets. Okay. So entanglement in fisheries nets, removal of river water and siltation, these all are threatening this animal. And Gangetic dolphin is declared as India's national aquatic animal, and it is also a state aquatic animal of Assam government. Okay. So recently, like, annual Ganges river dolphin census was undertaken by World Wide Fund for Nature. So World Wide Fund for Nature India recently took Ganges river dolphin census between especially Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary and Narora Ramsar site. Okay. So in collaboration with UP, census was taken place in Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary and Narora Ramsar site. So you can remember that. So these are the important topics for the day, and thank you for watching. Do subscribe and do comment if you have